Gypsy Rose Blanchard's life did not begin with freedom or choice. It began under observation. From the moment she could speak, her words were filtered. From the moment she could walk, her legs were taken from her. To the outside world, Gypsy was the picture of suffering. A chronically ill child bound to a wheelchair, dependent on feeding tubes, medications, and constant care. Her mother, Dee Blanchard, became her voice, her advocate, and her gatekeeper. Doctors listened, charities donated, communities rallied around a story of endless illness and unwavering devotion. But behind the closed doors of their small home, the truth lived in silence. Gypsy was not sick in the way the world believed. She could stand. She could eat. She could breathe freely. What she could not do was leave. Her identity was controlled so completely that she did not know her real age. Punishments followed questions. Fear followed curiosity. Love was conditional. And as the years passed, childhood blurred into captivity. Cameras stopped rolling, but the control never did. Every conversation was monitored. Every relationship was filtered. Until one night, alone in her room, Gypsy discovered the internet. A glowing screen became her escape, a place where her mother's voice did not interrupt, where she could type what she could never say aloud. And in that digital darkness, a connection formed, quiet at first, then consuming. For the first time in her life, Gypsy felt seen. And once someone sees you, it becomes impossible to return to being invisible. The public saw smiles. The unseen messages told the truth. Late at night, while the house slept, Gypsy poured her reality into private conversations with Nicholas Gojon. In those messages, she was not a patient or a child. She was a prisoner searching for air. She spoke about punishments disguised as protection, about being treated as fragile while feeling trapped, about fear that followed every attempt at independence. Nicholas listened, but he did more than listen. He absorbed her pain and transformed it into purpose. Their conversations grew longer, deeper, more intense. Emotional dependence formed on both sides. The unseen videos and messages later released showed Gypsy whispering hopes, rehearsing future conversations, and imagining a life that did not include control. Fantasy crept in quietly. Roles were assigned. Escape was discussed not as an option, but as destiny. Each message reinforced the belief that no one else would help her, that authorities would never listen, that doctors had already failed her. And slowly, the line between imagination and intention disappeared. The messages became a private world where fear felt justified and drastic ideas felt necessary. These were not cries broadcast to the public. They were confessions hidden in plain sight, and every word pushed them closer to a choice that could never be undone. As months passed, Gypsy's desperation deepened. Attempts to assert herself were met with tighter control. Phones were taken. Accounts were monitored. Threats were made of arrest, of abandonment, of being locked away forever. Gypsy began to believe escape without violence was impossible. The unseen messages reveal her conflict, fear of consequences colliding with the terror of staying. Nicholas framed himself as her rescuer, the only one willing to act. Together, They discussed scenarios that once felt distant and unreal. But reality has a way of closing in. The house felt smaller. Time felt heavier. And the plan moved from words to action. On the night everything changed. The house was silent. No cameras. No audience. No sympathetic strangers. Only a lifetime of control reaching its breaking point. When morning came, nothing could be undone. What followed would shock investigators and fracture public opinion, because this was not a crime driven by greed or rage, but by desperation shaped over years. The discovery of D.D. Blanchard's death sent shockwaves through the community. Online posts from Gypsy's account appeared, disturbing, confusing, and alarming. Many believed Gypsy had been kidnapped. Others feared she had been murdered. The truth surfaced quickly, and it was nothing anyone expected. Gypsy was found alive, walking freely. The wheelchair narrative collapsed instantly. Medical histories were questioned. Doctors revisited records. Investigators uncovered years of deception layered so convincingly that even professionals had been misled. This was no longer a simple homicide. It was a psychological labyrinth. Public sympathy shifted violently. Some saw Gypsy as a victim of prolonged abuse. Others saw planning, deception, and intent. The unseen messages became critical evidence, revealing vulnerability, dependency, manipulation, and decision-making. They showed a young woman shaped by control but also capable of choice. And the world struggled to reconcile both truths at once. The courtroom was silent, but the weight inside it was unbearable. Every seat was filled, not just with people but with opinions. Prosecutors stood firm, laying out timelines, messages, and planning. They spoke of intent, of coordination, of decisions made long before the crime occurred. Screens displayed excerpts from conversations that once lived in darkness. Each word was dissected, each pause scrutinized. To the state, this was a calculated act. Not an accident, not a moment of passion, but a decision formed over time. The defense told a different story. They spoke of medical abuse, of control so complete it reshaped reality. Experts explained how long-term manipulation can fracture judgment, how fear becomes normalized, how escape feels impossible. They described a life where obedience meant survival and resistance meant punishment. Gypsy sat quietly as both versions of her life were argued in front of strangers. She was portrayed as a victim. She was portrayed as a planner. And sometimes both at once. Public opinion fractured along the same lines. Outside the courthouse, debates erupted. Some demanded accountability. Others demanded compassion. The unseen messages resurfaced again and again, replayed across media platforms, each viewer drawing their own conclusions. Gypsy ultimately accepted a plea deal, acknowledging her role while maintaining she saw no other way out. Nicholas received a far harsher sentence, labeled the primary actor. But when the gavel fell, it brought no relief. No verdict could undo years of control. No sentence could fully define who was responsible. Justice was delivered, but closure never arrived. Years have passed, but the case refuses to rest. Gypsy Rose Blanchard became more than a name. She became a symbol. To some, she represents survival at an unimaginable cost. To others, she represents a line that should never be crossed. Documentaries, interviews, and newly released unseen messages continue to resurface, reigniting debate with every generation that discovers her story for the first time. Each new clip adds context, but never certainty. Psychologists still analyze the case. Legal scholars still debate responsibility. Viewers still ask the same question. How much choice does someone truly have when control defines their entire existence? Gypsy's release from prison did not end the story. It transformed it. She stepped into a world that already knew her, judged her, and decided who she was before she spoke a word. The unseen messages remain the most haunting element, not because they provide answers, but because they reveal the slow erosion of boundaries, the quiet buildup of desperation, and the dangerous power of isolation. This case is not remembered for brutality, but for complexity. It forces society to confront uncomfortable truths about abuse that hides behind smiles, about systems that fail to question, and about how easily suffering can be mistaken for care. In the end, this is not just a crime story. It is a warning that harm does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it grows silently, message by message, year by year, until the consequences become impossible to escape.